The galaxy was wide, bright, and filled with countless civilizations, but few shined as brilliantly as the Aurolith Empire. Their cities floated between the stars like silver gardens. Their ships traveled faster than the speed of thought. Their people were tall, graceful, and powerful. And at the heart of this vast empire sat Empress Seraphiline Valora, a woman known across galaxies as a ruler of poise, wisdom, and unmatched authority. She wore a crown made of star metal and light. Her throne room glowed with crystal pillars and golden patterns flowing like rivers on the walls. To most, she seemed untouchable, a figure that stood above all others. Yet behind the shining image was a quiet truth. Seraphiline was lonely. She had advisors, soldiers, scholars, entire worlds under her rule, but no one stood beside her as an equal. The Auroliths admired her, bowed to her, and feared disappointing her, but they never spoke to her. Not truly. A ruler could have everything and still lack something deeper, and there was one thing Seraphiline admired that her people never understood: humanity. She watched humans from afar, through distant observation archives and broadcast signals. She watched their cities rise, fall, and rise again. She watched them travel to new planets with nothing but hope and tools. She watched them sing even in difficult times, laugh even in sadness, and stand again even after they were broken. Humans were small, fragile, and compared to her people, physically weak. Yet they kept going. There was a fire inside them she could not explain, and she admired it quietly, like someone admiring a flame through glass. But the peace of the galaxy never lasted long. A threat rose from beyond the edge of the known star systems, a force called the Void Star Swarm. They were not animals. They were not machines. They were something in between, born from the empty dark beyond maps and charts. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They only consumed on planets, moons, energy, life. A world could fall in hours. Seraphiline ordered her empire to prepare defenses. Her admirals strengthened their fleets. Her scientists studied captured fragments of the swarm. Every Aurolith world fortified itself behind shimmering planetary shields. The council spoke to her with confidence. We will defend ourselves. The swarm cannot break us. But Seraphiline asked a different question. And what of the others? The smaller civilizations? The colonies? The peaceful worlds without armies? The council fell silent. To them, those worlds were not their responsibility. To Seraphiline, they were lives, children of the stars like any other. She could not ignore them. So she sent a message out, carried by long-range transmitters across thousands of light years. A simple call. To any who would stand to defend the galaxy, we seek allies. We seek unity. We seek hope. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Most civilizations remained silent. Some replied with fear and unwilling to fight. Some replied with arrogance, thinking it was not their problem. Some believed the Aurolith would surely win without help. Only one species answered the call with certainty: humanity. Human fleet docked on the orbiting platform above Aurolith Prime. Their ships were not elegant like Aurolith vessels. They were built of dark metal, heavily armored, rough in shape, ships that looked like they were built by people who expected to be punched by the universe and were ready to punch back. Among them was a man named Captain Adrian Holt. He wore no crown, no glowing armor. His uniform was simple, practical, with worn edges showing long service. His eyes were steady, not fearful, not overwhelmed by the crystal palace and shining guards that greeted him. He walked with purpose. When he reached the Empress's presence, he did not kneel like many did. Instead, he placed one hand on his chest, a soldier's respectful greeting. Captain Adrian Holt of the United Terran Coalition, reporting to answer the call. Her advisors murmured in disapproval. They expected reverence, not respect. Seraphiline raised a hand and silence followed. Her voice was calm, warm, smoother than flowing water. Humanity answered when others did not. For that alone you are welcome here. Adrian nodded once. We do not fight because we are the strongest, he said. We fight because someone must. The words struck her deeper than he knew. Her people believed strength ruled the stars. Humans believed responsibility did, and that difference mattered. In the weeks that followed, humans and Auroliths worked together. The Oroliths taught humans how to navigate star-warping corridors and energy lattice shields. Humans, in return, showed tactics no Orolith strategist ever considered: unpredictable maneuvers, improvisation under pressure, creativity in disaster. The two races were different. Yes, but they fit together like two halves of a solution. Seraphiline often watched Adrian as he instructed his people. He spoke with a voice that gave courage. He corrected mistakes without insult. He listened, truly listened. This was a kind of leadership her empire rarely saw. One evening they stood together in the observation hall, watching galaxies shine like scattered diamonds. Adrian spoke softly. Your empire is beautiful. Seraphiline looked at the stars, stars she had seen 1,000 times. Beauty is easy to create. Peace is not. Adrian's expression changed, something between understanding and sorrow. Peace costs us more than war, he said, but it's worth it. She realized then that despite their differences, they shared something important. They both carried the weight of many lives, but not everyone welcomed this cooperation. The Orolith High Council whispered behind closed doors. They saw humans as crude, unrefined, unworthy to stand alongside the Empress. One counselor, Lord Kalir, finally dared speak openly during a strategy assembly. Your Majesty, the humans are impulsive and primitive. They lack discipline. They are not fit to stand beside you in war, or anywhere. Adrian remained silent, his posture unchanged. Seraphiline looked at the counselor with calm eyes. Do you believe courage is primitive? Or loyalty? Or heart? Kalir opened his mouth, but no answer came. She continued. Humans may lack our strength, but they carry something rarer, the will to rise every time they fall. The room fell quiet, but silence does not mean agreement. The counselors bowed, but resentment simmered beneath their polite expressions, and Seraphiline knew the truth. If she chose to stand with humanity, she would stand against her own council. Meanwhile, the Void Star swarm devoured 3 more star systems. The war was coming. Not someday. Not soon. Now. Seraphiline stood in her throne room, crown resting heavy on her head, watching holographic displays of falling worlds, millions of lives lost, cultures disappearing. She felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on her shoulders. A ruler could lead from afar, but could a leader ask others to sacrifice if she would not stand with them? The doors opened behind her. She did not need to turn to know it was Adrian. His presence was calm, steady, quietly strong. He spoke softly. You don't have to carry this alone. For a moment she closed her eyes. She had ruled her entire life. She had stood above everyone, because that was what a ruler must do. But now she wondered if a true leader should stand beside others instead. She turned to Adrian. Her voice was gentle. Then stand with me. He nodded. No hesitation. And in that single moment something changed inside her. The crown on her head suddenly felt heavier than ever. Heavy with expectation. Heavy with pride. Heavy with distance between her and the people she needed to fight for. She touched the crown lightly. It was not time to remove it yet. But soon. Very soon. Every day reports came in of the Void Star swarm consuming more worlds. Their dark shifting forms moved like shadow storms through space, silent and unstoppable. Where they passed, silence followed. No survivors, no remains, only lifeless dust and broken rock. On Orolith Prime, the capital city grew busier than ever. Holographic war maps filled every hall. Communication towers pulsed with constant signals. Humans and Oroliths worked side by side, training, planning, preparing. Yet for all the visible movement, there was something invisible changing too. The distance between Empress Seraphiline and her people began to show. The council watched her closely. They saw how she spoke to humans with familiarity, how she walked the command decks instead of remaining on her throne, how she listened to Captain Adrian Holt as an equal. To them, this was unacceptable. A ruler was meant to remain above. But Seraphiline no longer believed that. She had always stood apart because she thought that was her duty. A symbol of perfection, someone who guided from above. But standing above also meant standing alone, and she was tired of being alone. The council's disapproval, The council met without her, gathered in a tall room made of clear crystal walls that overlooked the stars. They whispered with anger, fear, and pride. "She is letting humans influence her judgment," Lord Kalir hissed, pacing across the floor, long cloak whispering behind him. "She risked the stability of the Empire." Another counselor added, "They are beneath us." A third said firmly, "Crude, emotional, reckless." Yet another voice, quiet, old, spoke up. And yet, they are the only ones who answered. Silence fell. Even the council could not deny that truth. Humanity had come when others stayed silent. Kalir's face twisted in frustration. He wanted control, order, and a future where Oroliths remained superior. Seraphilene's admiration for humanity threatened that. "We must remind her of her duty," he said finally, and every counselor agreed. Training and trust meanwhile, Seraphiline and Adrian continued working together. They stood in a vast training hall where holographic simulations formed entire star systems. Starships of glowing light danced in complex battle demonstrations. The Orolith commanders watched Adrian with doubtful eyes. They believed their strategies were perfect, refined through centuries. But the humans brought something different. Unpredictability, creativity, courage without hesitation. Seraphiline stood by as Adrian demonstrated a maneuver, using a fleet of smaller ships to draw the swarm into a focused corridor, a trap that forced them into a narrow formation where they became easier to destroy. One Orolith admiral stepped forward, skeptical. "This strategy relies on sacrifice," he said. "Those small fleets would be the first to fall." Adrian nodded. "Yes, but they wouldn't fall alone. We move together. No one gets left behind." The admiral frowned. "That is not how war works," Adrian answered quietly. "Then maybe war needs to change." Seraphiline watched both men. She admired Adrian's words, not because they were bold, but because they were true. The Oroliths fought with perfection, but humans fought with heart. And in this war, heart mattered. A moment of stillness. One late night, Seraphiline stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The towers glowed gently and the skies shimmered with ships rising and descending from orbit. She heard footsteps behind her. Familiar ones. Adrian joined her, placing his hands on the railing beside her. They didn't speak at first. The silence was comfortable. "You are thinking deeply," Adrian said finally. Seraphiline let out a long, slow breath. "I am thinking of responsibility. Leaders must be strong. But I wonder, what is the meaning of strength?" Adrian looked at her, not at the crown, not at the title, but at her. "Strength isn't standing above others," he said. "It's standing with them." Her heart stirred. "You say that as if it is easy," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, it's the hardest thing there is." She looked down at the city, her empire, her people. For the first time in her life, she wondered if her crown was more burden than honor. The breaking point news arrived that a nearby system, the Lumarine Belt, was under attack. It was home to millions of civilians, traders, and families from dozens of different species. They had no military. They were defenseless. The council gathered in the war room, holograms of the swarm closing in. "We cannot spare ships," Lord Kalir said coldly. "We must protect our core worlds. The belt is not part of our empire." Seraphiline looked at him with disbelief. "They are innocent. They are irrelevant," Kalir corrected. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting the Empress speak. Seraphiline stepped forward. "We will aid them." Kalir's voice rose sharply. "Your Majesty, to send our fleets to defend them risks our borders." Seraphilene's gaze hardened. "Then we risk them." The council erupted in protests. Adrian felt tension building. Not just political tension, but personal tension. The Empress stood at a crossroads. Kalir spoke again, this time with accusation. "You do this because of the humans. Because of him." The room fell silent. Seraphiline did not raise her voice. "I do this because life matters, all life, no matter where it was born." Kalir's eyes burned with anger. He had lost, but he had not accepted defeat. The decision Seraphiline left the council chamber with Adrian beside her. Her footsteps were quiet, steady, but her heart was racing. When they reached the throne room, she stopped at the steps where her throne sat, tall, bright, Radiant. She reached up slowly. Her hands touched her crown. Adrian watched, frozen, realizing what she was about to do. This crown was not just metal. It was history, responsibility, authority, distance, but now it felt wrong. It felt like a wall between her and the galaxy she wanted to protect. She lifted the crown from her head. The room seemed to hold its breath. Her long silver hair fell freely down her back. She looked younger, more human, more real. She stepped down from the throne platform. One step, then another, until she stood on the same level as Adrian. No throne between them. No rank, no titles, just two people. She looked into his eyes. "A leader cannot save others from far away," she said softly. "So I will stand where the danger is. With you, with them, with everyone who fights to live." Adrian's voice was almost a whisper. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I choose this. I choose to fight as Seraphiline, not as Empress." Her choice echoed through the palace, through the empire, through history itself. The Empress stepped down, not because she was weak, but because she was stronger than the crown she carried. And somewhere, deep in the dark of space, the Void Star Swarm continued to advance. But now, the galaxy had something new, not just soldiers, not just ships, but unity. And unity was powerful. The galaxy shook as the Void Star Swarm advanced. Dozens of star systems fell silent, and space itself seemed darker each day. Where once stars glowed bright, now shadows consumed everything. But something had changed. On the ship Orion's Light, a combined fleet of Auroliths and humans flew together. Ships that once had never shared space now moved in the same formation. Voices that once belonged to different worlds now spoke through shared communication lines. They were no longer just separate civilizations. They were allies. And the one who had made that possible, Seraphiline, no longer stood on a throne. No crown rested on her head. Instead, she wore battle armor made of polished white alloy, simple and graceful. She looked less like a queen and more like a guardian. Beside her stood Captain Adrian Holt, uniform worn but spirit unbroken. Together, they prepared for the final confrontation, a battle at the edge of a dying star system, where the Void Star Swarm gathered in numbers greater than any fleet had ever faced. If they failed here, the galaxy would fall. The calm before the storm. The war command room pulsed with holographic stars and shifting formations. Officers spoke in urgent tones. The room smelled of metal, pressure, and anticipation. Adrian studied the enemy formation, a massive, shifting mass of black, twisting shapes. The swarm moved like a single creature, responding instantly to every change in the battlefield. Seraphiline approached the star map, her eyes calm. "Fear is natural," she said, her voice soft yet strong. "But fear does not decide our fate." "We do," the officers straightened, drawing courage from her presence. Adrian looked at her, and for just a moment, he saw something beyond command, a quiet determination that burned brighter than any star. He turned to the fleet. "This is not just our fight. This is the galaxy's fight. We stand because someone must stand." "We fight together," the fleet answered in one voice. Together. The battle begins. The Void Star Swarm descended like a black wave. Aurolith cruisers fired shimmering beams of pure light. Human destroyers launched guided rail shot volleys that lit the darkness with streaks of white. The battlefield glowed with energy bursts and flickering explosions. The swarm did not scream. It did not communicate. It simply advanced. Ship after ship fought with desperate strength. Seraphiline stood at the command console, issuing orders with steady precision. "Form shield lattices. Rotate damaged ships to the rear. Support Earth Fleet Alpha." Adrian coordinated the human strike teams, his voice firm. "Squad Delta, break left flanks. Group Sigma, target the swarm's forward cores." They moved like two halves of the same mind, united, focused, unstoppable. But the swarm was endless. More shapes poured from dark space, thousands upon thousands. Swallowing the stars themselves, the fleet began to strain. Shields dimmed. Engines overheated. Voices on communication channels faltered under pressure. And still, they fought. The great discovery, in the midst of chaos. Aurolith scientists detected something at the heart of the swarm. A central void core, pulsing like a heartbeat, controlling the hive. If the core was destroyed, the entire swarm would collapse. But there was a problem. The core was protected by a shell of living dark energy strong enough to destroy any ship that touched. Seraphiline looked at the readings. Adrian saw her expression and understood instantly. She had already made her decision. "You plan to go to the core," he said. "Someone must," she replied quietly. He stepped forward. "Then I go with you." She shook her head slowly. "Adrian, this is something I must end." But Adrian stood firm. "When you stepped down from your throne, you proved something. You chose to stand with us. I will not let you stand alone now." Her breath caught. For so long, she had been alone at the top of the galaxy. Now, finally, someone refused to let her be alone. She felt warmth, not from pride, not from duty, but from something more human, something grounding. "Then we go together," she said, into the heart of darkness. The two boarded a specialized strike craft, built with combined human and Aurolith design. Small, fast, resilient, a ship built not to last one, but to reach. They flew through waves of darkness, weaving between shifting masses of void star creatures. Human pilots and Aurolith guardians opened a path ahead of them, sacrificing their own safety so the strike craft could advance. Every moment was a battle. Every second counted. Adrian piloted with sharp precision, while Seraphiline maintained the ship's energy shields, her hands glowing as she channeled the power she once used only to rule. They pushed deeper. The void core appeared through the darkness, a massive sphere of swirling black and violet energy, like a living storm. It pulsed in rhythmic waves and the heartbeat of destruction. Seraphiline's voice was calm. "We destroy the core and the swarm ends, but the energy release will collapse everything around it." Adrian breathed out slowly. "Then we finish it quickly." She nodded. Together they activated the resonance pulse generator, a device designed by human engineers and Aurolith scientists working side by side. Only this strange unity had made it possible. They placed the pulse device into the ship's launch cradle. Seraphiline reached to activate it, but the ship jolted, struck by a void star creature. Metal shrieked. Energy arcs flashed. The controls flickered. For a moment, the ship began to fall apart. Adrian grabbed her arm, steadying her. "We're almost there." They moved together, calm, steady, and with a final coordinated motion, they launched the device. A wave of blinding light rippled outward, growing brighter and brighter until it swallowed everything. The void core began to shatter. The swarm convulsed. Across the galaxy, every dark creature twisted and collapsed into dust. The darkness ended. Silence returned, and the stars shined again. After the light, the strike craft drifted, damaged but intact. Emergency power flickered to life. Seraphiline and Adrian sat quietly, breathing hard but alive. Outside, the battlefield was peaceful. Ships that had fought desperately now floated in calm starlight. A message came through the comm channel. "The swarm. It's gone. The galaxy is saved." Cheers erupted across fleets and worlds, but Seraphiline did not look proud. She looked simply relieved. Adrian watched her, a small smile forming. "You did it," she shook her head softly. "We did." A new future. When they returned to Aurolith Prime, the Council tried to restore her to the throne. They begged her to return as Empress, ruler of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. But Seraphiline only smiled gently. She touched the crown, the symbol that once rested so heavily on her head, and set it down, not in rejection, but in peace. "A crown is meant to lead from above. I wish to stand among those I lead." There was no anger in her words, no defiance, just truth. Some called her foolish, some called her brave, but many, many more called her inspiring. And Adrian? He simply walked beside her, not as protector or subordinate, but as equal. Where one once ruled alone, two now stood together. The galaxy remembered her not as the Empress, who commanded worlds, but as the leader who lowered her crown to stand beside others. And the world she helped save never forgot the lesson she taught. Strength is not measured by how high one stands, but by how many hands one reaches for.